with Ralf Diemer, Managing Director of eFuels Alliance. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I'm going to dive right in to the questions. I know you've been sharing content. You're going to be sharing content. I'm asking for some more for our video interviews. I'd love to know your thoughts on what are the biggest challenges for scaling PTL and SAF production and therefore adoption across the industry in MENA but globally as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the major challenges are the same as every emerging industry faces. So it's completely new. There is no upscale production yet, meaning we need big investments. Mm-hmm. So that's the first obstacle, of course. You need investors.
Yeah.
That is much better now than it was 3 years ago when I started the work on the eFuel Alliance. But of course, investors of this scale need a security that the investment will not be stranded. For that, you need, for example, off-takers. So are airlines prepared, for example, to use eSAF or SAF in larger amounts? Can they pay for it?
Yes.
Because prices will be higher. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, in the aviation sector, one of the major obstacles, besides some certification issues, but setting them at the side because they will be solved anytime soon. The problem with SAF or with the aviation sector is it's a very price-sensitive sector, since basically the business model of an airline is to be global. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, for example, the European approach must not necessarily be the approach in the MENA region or in any other region of the world. Mm-hmm. And that can cause competitive disadvantages. Yes. And that has to be solved. And that is also a problem. So basically we need global solutions here. And that's always difficult because, as we know, governments, regions are very different. Mm-hmm. Concerning the MENA region, I mean, clearly this should be the perfect reason for the perfect region for producing these fuels. Mm-hmm. You have sun and wind. Yes. You have space. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have to tackle some water problems, which you don't have here. And you have maybe a CO2 source problem because you don't have much biomass available. But in general, you have very potential countries like this one, for example, having a lot of money coming from oil and gas. Mm-hmm. They can invest, so the investment is not the problem here. And they have a lot of knowledge in this field because they are already producers, right? I think this MENA should be a leading region in terms of e-fuel production, as they are a leading region in terms of oil and gas.
Yes, yeah. Fantastic. You've touched on actually both of my next questions, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. So my first one is, what role do you see airlines and aircraft manufacturers playing in driving the scaling of adoption of e-fuels? Do you think they're aware of or playing the role that they need to?
So I mean, the pressure is there coming from governments, but also partly from the public. Mm-hmm. That they have to adjust in terms of lowering their CO2 emissions. I think this is no question. And all of them are aware that they need solutions. Of course, in the aviation sector, there is no bunch of solutions because, for example, the battery electric plane is not available anytime soon. Yeah. I don't know if it would make sense to have it anyway.
Yes.
Clearly, liquid fuels will stay the major driver of aviation. Compared to the maritime sector, for example, it's also more easy because you only have one fuel. Mm-hmm. In the maritime sector, you have 5, 6 different options, which makes it more flexible, but also more problematic because what is the option? Where should you invest in? Mm-hmm. That problem you don't have in the aviation sector. The big problem, as I mentioned, is global competitiveness and costs. And that is, for example, in the aviation sector, the big difference to road transport. How far goes the ability to pay for airlines to pay higher prices for fuels? And I think that's a key question where at the end regulation or even supportive schemes by governments will also have to play a role. This is not going by itself.
Yes.
But in terms of the necessity of bringing solutions forward, I think the aviation sector has to play a key role here.
Yeah, fantastic. And then you also mentioned about kind of global availability and also this particular region and other regions having much better access to resources that can enable PTL and eFuels. What do you think are the key steps needed to ensure global availability of PTL and eFuels rather than keeping it regionally locked?
Yeah, I mean, we need global solutions. I'm not necessarily sure that they will be tackled by governments.
Yes.
So, but why not having global solutions driven by the airlines themselves, by airports? Of course, it's not only the airlines, it's also the infrastructure provider. I know that this is an ongoing process. There has to be also a pathway to that. And it's not always, I mean, we see that also in other sectors, especially coming from Europe, which is a highly regulated continent in any way. Regulation can be a good thing, but it can be also making things much more complicated. And this is what we see, especially in this field, also partly right now in Europe when you think about the Renewable Energy Directive or when you think about the ReFuelEU Aviation regulation. So I think it's very important that also the industry itself come forward. And that is, by the way, also something the eFuel Alliance is standing for. We are a cross-sectoral initiative. We have many fuel producers, but we are also open to all use cases because we really think at the end it's about the uptake of a global value chain of renewable energy production. Nothing less than that, by the way. And if you think about the amounts we need, not only for the aviation sector, there is no other way than a global way. And I think aviation can again be a driver because they are already global. So global approach is for aviation the daily business. That is of course not necessarily the case in other areas. And therefore there could be also a driver to be basically a poster model for this kind of approach.
Fantastic, thank you. And then I suppose it would be great to hear, we're coming to the end of day one of the main conference. I'd love to hear any key takeaways that you've got from the sessions so far today and at the event.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm attending these kind of conferences now for 3 years. So it's for me, it was very interesting because I'm not coming from this area. So for me, the whole infrastructure, the whole companies and most of the companies and also the people were quite new, which is also, of course, very interesting. But I think it's, at the beginning, it was very optimistic. I think it's starting to be more realistic, which is a good thing because we are seeing now concrete projects on the way. Of course, with all the obstacles you have when you turn, so to speak, wish into reality. And on the other hand, you see on the panels, it's much more concrete about problems they actually have. So these stories we heard from several companies about their experiences using eSAF or getting eSAF. Also the obstacles we have in terms of infrastructure, certification issues. So it's getting very concrete. This is always not the shiny business so much, right? Because it's hard work. And I think without hard work, we will not succeed. And that is that is what I sense as a major change when I think these kind of conferences 3 years ago. Still, what I find amazing is who comes together, the different regions of the world, the different fuel producers, but also the different technology providers, also more and more finance sector, which of course is very important. I think this is something I really value very much, because you meet a lot of people from different areas in one room, which you not often do actually.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And obviously that's exactly what we're trying to do. So it's good to hear that's the experience you've had.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, thank you. I will tell the team, they'll be thrilled.
All right.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for being involved.